Dakota, I just want to say, seeing you up here, I taught you in 6th grade. Seeing you up here now, I want to just commend you for your hard work, your diligence, and your perseverance to be up here and doing your senior thesis. So
Thank you very
I
much.
commend you for that. My name is Aaron Southwick. I teach 10th grade humanities here as well. I teach Latin. And well, I've had Dakota for a couple classes, so I think he knows me a little bit.
Well done, Mr. Millett. My name is Lori Rogers, and I'm a teacher of gifted and talented.
My name is Valerie Petrie. I'm an educator. I've taught in the public school, private school, and homeschool.
Dakota, my first question is a question of clarification, actually. You mentioned Robinson's 5 objectives.
It's Kim Jones.
I'm sorry, I had the wrong name. Thank you. I missed number 3, so I had it prepares you for citizenship. It's a skilled workforce, good thinkers, and to learn competition. But I missed the 3rd one.
The third one was to teach cultural literacy.
Thank you.
Mr. Millett, one of the things that you mentioned was that education should change, not the schools. I was wondering how do you tease those out? How do you separate education from schools?
Well, the problem that schools have right now is the education. The schools don't know any better. They don't know how to educate outside of the system because it was developed so early on. I'm saying the core foundation of education should change itself. And when that changed, the schools will change.
Great job, Dakota.
Thank you.
My question, I found your title interesting. Could you explain how you chose it and what it means?
Well, it was between, well, I love Pink Floyd, and I thought it fit the title well, but it was between that and how can you eat your pudding if you don't eat your meat? But, you know, it was between that and I thought this fit a little bit better.
Another sort of clarification question, I suppose. I agree with you that education has been changing for centuries. And the idea that modern education is tied into the Industrial Revolution and thus the focus on science and math. And this sort of system could stifle creativity. Are you arguing then that creativity as a centerpiece of education, are you arguing that creativity should be another subject, like math as a subject, like science as a subject, like language as a subject? Are you arguing for creativity as a subject?
I'm arguing that subjects allow for students to exercise and maybe just try to put innate abilities and creativity into each class and see how, just being able to assess each student on, not on grades, but on their way of creativity, their way of understanding, their intelligence, how they understand each topic studied. Yeah, I mean, just putting creativity into each subject, not its own separate subjects.
If I could just follow up on that a little bit. Did you go into any classrooms that you consider high functioning in creativity so that you could explain how it would be a better way of doing it, or was that not an option that you had available to you?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Did you have any a chance to go into any classrooms that you would consider were high functioning in the area of creativity that dovetail with the other subjects that you could bring back ideas, a way to promote this in education?
Well, here at Geneva, there's 2 classes that I've noticed do this more. It's literature and history. Here we don't have desks in our literature and history classes. We have big oval table, and it's so that we can all have discussion and say what we're thinking instead of just here's history, here it is, chew it up, spit back on paper, next subject. We get to discuss and learn and become more knowledgeable by discussing.
I concur that discussion is a great way to promote creativity. I appreciate that. But I was just following up to that question. The second question I have is, you mentioned one of the studies that you brought up was that they were all geniuses in kindergarten, and then it slowly decreased. Their creativity decreased as they grew older.
Yes, ma'am.
Was in that study, did they mention anything about the possibility of that being a problem with the test, or was it all laid at the feet of education?
In the article that I found, they didn't mention anything about the test. they said that they changed up the test every time they were tested, but they didn't say how the test was set up. They just said that that's how they did it. Sir Ken Robinson was the one who I heard talk about it, and he started this education revolution. So I assumed it was pretty.
Are you going to run for office?
I can run there now.
You mentioned the 9 kinds of intelligence: mathematical, musical, spatial, etc., and also you gave an example of an assessment on the American Revolution. I'm curious, would you have presented your senior thesis in a different way if given the opportunity?
I personally feel that I could have done another controversial issue, something that was more meaningful to me, and that could have come across more meaningful to everyone else. I feel like I could have personally done a film documentary on a controversial issue, or I don't know, Zach Ward could have written a controversial song, or Emily Riedlinger could have written a short story, each having their own controversial issue, which is what they ask for now. But there are some who are this is their stuff. This is where they're at. Their element, their meat, everything. So.
Along these lines, it goes to the transformation quote from Robinson, which I enjoyed. So you're basically saying you would transform the way the senior thesis is being done. In now more globally on the whole scale of education, what are some particular things you would want to see happen in education to introduce this creativity value?
First, I would suggest getting rid of the grading system, actually. And that's a whole other thesis. I'm not going to get into that. So let's go into just a little bit of it. The grading system, it pushes out creativity because students focus on just getting the grade, or just passing that year, or just that test. I'm guilty of it. I mean, student section. I mean, yeah, Ian Camusi, Big Ramsey, Tegan. They just go for the grade, and they don't become more knowledgeable. Like I said before, they get it, chew it up, spit it out on paper, next subject. They don't. It's nothing to them. I would also advocate allowing them to, in all classes, allow them to explore other creative options, which is allowing them to just think and, what's the word? Emphasize in classrooms, in each subject, emphasize the exercising of one's creative thought, allowing them to find their way of understanding and their way of learning it, which is why I have the 9 multiple intelligences.
Mr. Hill, I have one last question. I appreciate the way that you encourage teachers and educators to promote creativity within a subject area, not throwing out everything and focus on that, but that become a more integral part of all subjects, outstanding thinking. I was wondering if you have a suggestion as to ways that students could promote it from their perspective as well as not just teachers making the opportunity, but what's an avenue that students could pursue within the framework of schools that would also promote creativity?
They can, what are you saying that? Are you looking for how would the students the students right now, how would they go about going from the education system that we have now to going to be creative?
Well, I know there's a very limited grading system, so we have to stand by that. We have to honor that. But within those confines of the math and the science, is there any wiggle room, in your opinion, for students to promote their own personal area of giftedness? As you said, they're all gifted.
There is a way. This whole American Revolution, education revolution, is still very new, so it's still developing. It's in all my research. It's only been in the past 5-6 years since the topic started arising. So it's not fully developed yet. But the idea, say in math and science, the way that can happen is allowing students to kind of just experience it. It's kind of a childish way, which is why it's still developing. It's kind of a childish way, allowing them to experience how a math problem works, how the certain how the certain science project works. And schools do it, just not enough. Schools do it very little.
I also have one more question. You made the comments, schools should not change, education should change. Where do you believe this change or reform should come from?
I believe that it should start in, like I said before, in the education system, or in the core foundations of education, which means you would have to start in the government. The government pours the most amount of our money into the education system. That's our biggest. That's the government's biggest thing they put money into. What I'm advocating is we use that money to just reroute, reorganize, redo the entire system. So we should start in the government.
Along this line, we can give a standardized exam, and from that exam, learn, and you mentioned this, what someone knows precisely to say about math or say about science. We can know whether or not they can arrive at a sum. When we talk about creativity, though, can you just clarify for me what an assessment of creativity would look like? How would we know if someone had arrived at a certain creativity value?
I guess by saying seeing how if they understand each topic studied. I mean, I guess you just know. I mean, it's just seeing them understand and learn and become more passionate about something, and with that passion, that everything else comes with it: science, math, language, literature, history. If everything else goes with it, then you know you've hit it. You've hit the sweet spot that they've taken hold of their intelligence and used it. Now, of course, they're not going to be great at everything. We're not genetically built that way. God didn't make us that way. I mean, I'm not genetically built to do a thesis, but but I know of people who are, and that's just an example.
One last question. It's at one point in your thesis you said something along the lines of, "I know this personally," and I didn't capture what exactly you were claiming to know. But the phrase personally struck a chord with me. So could you just discuss, is there any personal experience that you've had at Geneva that perhaps is the genesis for this argument?
I can. It's not Geneva's fault. They're also in this realm of, or this box, this mold of education. And we try to be different and break free of it, but it's just the core foundation of education that they have to follow. It's not Geneva's fault. But I mean, here at Geneva, the reason I chose the topic itself was because, it was, I think, earlier in junior year or sophomore year when I would come home all the time and I would get a terrible grade in math. I would get a terrible grade in whatever. My mom would always, be a mother and be like, "Well, you're the best at whatever." That's cliche, but she would say like, "Well, you're good at this," and now all people are good at, say, art or whatever it is, fill in the blank. And I told her, but education in our school doesn't care. That doesn't. We focus on making. We break through the mold a little bit because we focus on making good oral speakers and people who can present well, which is fine. But that's its own mold. Geneva's just focused on the language section of science, math, and language, and that's how I felt depressed and I loathed myself for a while because I wasn't able to meet the standards that Geneva required, and Geneva itself being harder. But if I was in public education, I would probably feel the same way, and that's how I've personally felt, and that's how the thesis came around.